Welcome to another episode of Social Media Church. I'm your host, Matt Williams, and every episode we try to talk about how can the church, the people of God, use social media and digital media as ministry to reach people and help as many people as possible find and follow Jesus. And today we have an awesome guest. He's back for round 2. It's Justin Herman. He's the online pastor at Mariners Church. And if you haven't listened to the last episode yet, go listen to that. Listen to this first and then make that your next listen, because he talks a lot about online church and strategy. And it's really valuable, and it's going to help any church leader trying to figure out online presence. For this episode, I'm super pumped because we're talking about a different angle. We're talking about digital media for kids and families. Every church leader, every church on the planet knows that we're trying desperately to reach families. We're trying to figure out how do we get kids and youth involved in the church in meaningful ways. And Justin's got some really cool stuff going with a podcast and YouTube channel called Carpooling for Kids. And so we're going to dive into that. Justin, it's so good to see you again. Welcome back.
Hey man, it's great being back. First episode was great. Round 2 is going to be wonderful. I'm wearing a new shirt, new ideas, new things to talk about. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be fantastic. So let's dive right in, Justin. So just for our listeners, there's probably some listeners that have heard of Carpooling of Jesus, but let's assume that a listener doesn't know what Carpooling with Jesus is. What is it? How did it start? Tell us what Carpooling with Jesus is.
All right. So Carpooling with Jesus is a daily kids devotional podcast. It happens Monday through Sunday, so 7 days a week. Monday through Friday is free, and then we do a bunch of additional content that we have behind a paywall. But it started because, it started with where all good things start. Okay, dads being involved. So my kids were on the way to school one day, and I work from home. I talked about that last episode. I live in Arizona. My church is in California. I'm the online pastor, and so I work from home. And I had a meeting cancel, so I said, "Hey, babe, how about I come with this morning? How about I jump in?" And like all good wives, she said, "Well, we kind of have a routine. We have a routine as we're going to school. We're listening to something. We're doing affirmations. We're praying. Okay, I married a godly woman who loves our kids. She's amazing." And I was like, "Oh, I love routine." Okay, spoiler alert, I don't like routine. But I just jumped in. I'm like, okay, dad's here. It's whatever. She puts on this podcast. Okay, and I love her. And she puts on this podcast. This podcast was 15 minutes long. It was a kids podcast. I don't remember the name of it. And I'm not throwing shade at it. I think if you're making kids content, you're doing the best you can. And I'd say the same for myself, man. I'm not a kids expert. Like, I have 4 kids, but it doesn't make me any more of an expert than some other dad or kids pastor or whatever. But I'm listening to this podcast, okay? And it was a 15-minute long deep dive into like the tax system of the New Testament, okay? And I'm listening to this, and I'm sure it was an off episode, okay? I don't know if the person who created that podcast is listening, or if it was rough. And I look at her, I'm like, this is what they're listening to? Like, and I'm looking at their faces, and they're like, oh, And so if you're listening to the podcast, I'm making a unflattering face, okay? They look like they're falling asleep. And I look at her, I'm like, there has to be a better podcast out there, which she says, I haven't found one. A lot of these don't update daily. A lot of them are, 2, 3, 4 years old. And if you scroll through, if you search kids devotionals, and you're looking for current stuff, there's some current stuff that maybe updates once a week. Maybe it's a 30-minute episode or a 15-minute episode once a week. But there's not a lot of, or really any daily small bite-sized devotionals. And I was like, I don't know. She's like, well, maybe you should start one. I was sharing a lot of my passionate views at the time. Like all good wives, she makes a great suggestion. Now, the backstory is I had done podcasts before. Like, I had my own podcast show for a while. I did a podcast called Controlled Chaos. It was a junior high ministry podcast for youth workers. I think it's still up on different podcast places. And we haven't updated that in years, but I did, 100 and some episodes with my mentor, Kurt Johnston. And it was a lot of fun. I was doing junior high ministry at the time. It was great. So I knew enough about podcasts. I was kind of running my own podcast company on the side, helping people start their own podcasts and whatnot. So I was familiar with the podcast space. And so I took like probably 4 months to like really think about it and like brainstorm and kind of create. And I sent some samples to some friends of mine at the church to get their feedback. And then January 6th, 2025, we launched Carpooling with Jesus. And at the time, it was a Monday through Friday, no more than 5 minutes, daily devotional. And the whole premise is, what would Jesus say if he was riding in the car with you to school? We're carpooling with Jesus. So if Jesus was riding with you to school, what would he say before you hop out of the car and you take on your day? Or, if you're homeschooled, he's sitting there at the breakfast table with you. What would he say before you're jumping into your day about friendships, about forgiveness, about trust, about integrity, about character, about reputation, about telling the truth, like all the things that we would want our kids learning about. And every episode has a verse, and every episode has some commentary on, kind of what I think. And every episode ends with a question so that parents can talk about it. Because my heart is, and this is like the youth pastor in me, I want parents to be the heroes of their kids' spiritual life. Like I want parents to be the one guiding that journey, like leading it. Like I love kids ministry. I love my kids pastor at my church. I want to be my kid's parent. Like God entrusted them to me to raise them up to walk in the ways of the Lord. So, Deuteronomy, right? And so every episode ends with a question. And then from there, probably did that for like 4 or 5 months, 6 months. And we expanded it to weekend episodes. And then we added in a couple additional podcasts. So, we kind of have a whole channel now of shows. We have Carpooling with Jesus. And then we have Goodnight Psalms, which is a nighttime devotional. It's about 2.5 minutes long. And we pick a psalm and again, some commentary. We end it with a prayer. There's no discussion question, but it's just to kind of calm the mind, calm the heart. And then we have Carpooling with Heroes of the Bible. It's a 5 episode. This one's awesome, dude. We just did the first one on Peter. The next one's on Ruth. We do it twice a month. 5 episode drops, and it's, each one's like 7-8 minutes long, and it's deep dive into that person. So like we took Peter and we took a deep dive into each area of his life. And we look past the obvious of the verses to kind of add that commentary in. So like, for instance, Peter was a fisherman. Okay. So like, well, what does that look like? Well, it means he's out in the water on the Sea of Galilee in the sun, tan. He's pulling the nets in by hand, which means he has thick arms, thick forearms, rough calluses. Like he's a guy that works daily for a living in the family business. And so we add color around that for kids to kind of paint the bigger picture. And that's how it started, and that's how it's going, and it is one of the funnest things I do, and my kids like it. Really, I make it for my kids. Yeah. The Goodnight Psalms was my kid's idea. He actually picked the title of it, and he helps me a bunch with it, actually. So it's for my kids. Now, luckily, by God's goodness, there's thousands of other families that listen to it around the country, which is a huge blessing. There's other churches that take advantage of it as well. We can talk about that later if you want. But that's how it started. That's kind of how it's going. And it's a blast.
Man, that's so cool. And I love how classic entrepreneurial mindset, you had a personal felt need, and you had a loving wife that says, well, if you don't like this, then why don't you do something about it? And so, so here we are.
I know this isn't a marriage podcast. But if you're a single dude out there, that's the kind of woman you're looking for.
Yeah.
Like you're looking for a godly woman who speaks her mind, challenges you. That's what you're looking for. So if you're a single dude out there, there's some free advice.
Amen to that. So you launched it in January of 2025. So we're 11 months in. Now you, like we talked about in the last episode and in this one, so you're the online pastor at Mariners Church. Is this part of Mariners Church? Is it in addition to, like, walk us through how you do this on top of your job and what the interaction is with your day job?
Okay. So a couple things. So when my wife challenged me on this and was like, hey, we should start it. Well, I kind of put together this thing. And the first thing I did was take it to the church. And I was like, hey, this should be a Mariners podcast. Like at the time I wasn't thinking about well, hey, we're going to expand it and let's put stuff behind a paywall and let's grow this thing. I was just thinking, hey, we're just going to do a 5-day devotional podcast. The church already does one. It's called the Gospel Everyday Podcast, and it goes through a daily devotion we do as a church. Every year we do a daily devotional. This year we're doing Through the Year by Warren Wiersbe. It's over there on my shelf. Next year we're doing Tozer book. And so, it's part of the culture of our church. And there's a podcast that goes along with it. I actually do Mondays on that podcast. So I'm very integrated, obviously, in with the digital team and our communications team, our content team. So I pitched this to them, and they passed on it. They passed on it. And I pitched it a second time. I was like, hey guys, I really think this would be great. And they passed on it a second time. Now, part of it is bandwidth. Part of it is, you throw out an idea. It's super easy to throw out an idea. It's like, okay, well, who's going to implement this idea? Who's recording it? Who's editing it? Who's coming up with the content? Who's scheduling all of this? What's the story? And, they were looking at the downstream impact of it. Well, I pitched it a third time, by the way. And they still were like, hey, this isn't for us. I was like, okay, I'm going to pursue this. I'm going to do this. My boss knew, the executive pastor knew, everybody kind of knew. And everyone was like, yeah, hey, go for it. Don't let it interrupt your work, of course, which it doesn't. So I was like, okay, that sounds great. So Fridays are my day off. It's my day of rest. It's the time where I put into the podcast. So I'm basically, I wake up, I go on a run, I have breakfast with my kids. So I usually get to 5, breakfast with the kids. They get off to school. I record for probably 4 hours. I edit for probably another 2 hours. And then by then they're out of school and I'm hanging out with them. So I just treat Friday like a regular day. And for me, that is rest because it's something I'm passionate about. I actually, no one's forcing me to do this. I want to do this. And the best part is, and I think the people listening, if they work at a church, I think they'll absolutely buy in what I'm saying. It's very hard to do something when you're bringing it to the staff. Okay, so I can empathize with the church passing on it. Obviously, I get that. When it's hey, we got all these staff and everyone's kind of doing a different role, and so now we got to get everyone together for a meeting. Sitting down on my computer and doing it by myself takes probably 1/20th of the time it would take doing it at the church. Okay, doing it at the church, it's hey, where's the script? Who's approving the script? Hey, who's recording it? Let's schedule them. Let's schedule all these different people. Hey, who's doing the graphics? All right, who's editing it? Okay, here's a checklist. Here's deliverable times. Here's a bunch of Google folders. Me, dude, I'm sitting down on my computer and saying, what, open up the God's word. What do I think Jesus would want to say to my kids as they're going to school? What do I think that this Psalm verse would say in a minute and a half, 2 minutes? What do I think this Psalm is saying to a kid before they're going to bed? And I just record. And so a team of 1 sometimes can accomplish more than a team of 9 or a team of 10. And so it makes the workload's very simple. Because I know what's coming and it's pretty predictable for me, and I get ahead on episodes a lot. So on a Friday, I might record, a whole month of episodes and, edit them throughout the month, so there's Fridays, I'll take off and relax and whatnot, but it's not a huge workload and it's me every episode. People don't seem to mind. At least my kids don't mind. And I think that gives us actually a couple of benefits, by the way, because it's not tied to a church. It's not tied to a specific geographic area. It's not Pastor Justin from Mariners Church in any episode. I've never mentioned Mariners Church in a single episode. I refer to myself as Pastor Justin, hey, carpool crew, Pastor Justin here. But other than that, they don't know details of where I live. They don't know that the church's name, and it's on purpose because I want it to be usable for everybody. So I want my kids to enjoy it. I want the kids in my kids' Christian, private school to enjoy it. There's a private school in Minnesota. They play the devotionals. This is so crazy. When someone emailed me about this is a while thing. They play the devotional at the start of the school day, and they play it on their PA system. Every classroom hears it, and then that's their discussion question. It was totally. Now it's not a huge Christian private school. I'm not trying to embellish or drive an ego thing by any means. But that's really cool to me that a school can take advantage of it. But they can take advantage of it because it's not, hey everyone, welcome to Carpooling with Jesus from Mariners Church or from Saddleback Church or from Lifeway Christian Resources. Buy a new Bible. Get in the new curriculum. All right, let's get into the episode. It's just not like that. It's just, I'm a pastor, I'm a dad. I want to talk to my own kids on their way to school, but the downstream impact of that is schools can take advantage of it. Other families can take advantage of it. They're not being sold anything. Other churches can take advantage of it, which I've seen a bunch of that, which really fires me up. But that's what they thought of it. So we have a bunch of staff that listen to it. Mostly moms, by the way. Mostly moms listen to it. So whenever we got everyone together for like a big pastors gathering, we do it every year. And so like a bunch of the moms were like, "Oh, we love the podcast. We love the podcast." And like their husbands who are, fellow pastors are like, "What podcast?" They have no idea because they don't drive their kids to school. Like they're, off at work. Like moms tend to run the routines of the morning typically. And, I'm sure there's dads out there that do. I'm sure there's single dads out there that do. So there's not throwing any shade to that, of course. But moms typically, we'll run the ongoing of the morning, the routine of the morning, and the podcast fits right into that routine. It's short, it's predictable time frame. Yeah. And, but yeah, it's the deal. Church, so far the church loves it. They haven't tried to take it over. I'm sure there might be a little bit of buyer's remorse because, we just hit 500,000 and I know that number would probably help on the dashboard if anyone out there, you guys know dashboards. Yeah. So that would probably be a helpful number on the dashboard, but they passed on it. No harm, no foul. Podcast is going great. Church is going great. Everybody's happy.
Man, that's so cool. I think there's so many threads to pull on there. First of all, 500,000 downloads, that's legit. So that is awesome. And I think so I think there, like our listeners, there's going to be different listeners coming from different perspectives, depending on, what their role is, what their experience is. For me, like I'm a serial entrepreneurially minded person. Always have my day job and I'm always hunting what else can I do? Because I'm similar to you in that, like, if I'm doing work that I'm passionate about, that's restorative to my soul. Like when I sit around bored,
it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like this is an assignment I'm doing. Like I get
500%. Yeah. And so but what I wanted to just mention and highlight, and then want to dig into some more tactical stuff and some more philosophical stuff with the podcast is you brought it to the church first. You had a great idea. You brought it to the church. It wasn't the right fit. And then you had two options there. You could be discouraged and put it on the shelf, or you can ask permission and say, "Hey, this won't affect my day job. I'm passionate about this. Can I do this?" You got blessing and permission and all of that. And now 500,000 downloads later in just 11 months, that's a lot of hours, a lot of time, people learning about Jesus, learning about the Bible, helping families and kids engage. And I just wanted to highlight and just mention, like, I appreciate, as a friend and as a fellow church worker, how you did it. You're like, "Hey, church, this is a cool idea." They're like, "Nope, doesn't fit, whatever reason." And you're like, "Okay, well, I still want to do it." And you pulled the trigger on it. And that's a really cool way to approach it.
So, looking from the pastor angle for a second. So church workers out there, right? Me, you, everyone else. I look at the character of Nehemiah as just a great framework for this. Nehemiah was an entrepreneurial leader. Nehemiah brought, heard of a need that was happening in his hometown in Jerusalem. He brought that need to, the guy in charge. He prayed for God's favor before he brought that. He's like, "Hey, I have an idea." Basically, "Hey, I have an idea. I want to go back to my hometown. I want to fix things up, whatever." Like he has a burden that's on him now. And he's sharing that burden. He asks for God's, favor as he goes and shares this. He goes and shares this. He has God's favor. He's given permission to do it, and he's able to follow through on this burden. Now, permission to do it is the church saying, "Hey, yeah, let's make it a Mariners Church podcast." One of the numerous, they have other podcasts. They have a great intentional parenting podcast that actually is it's really wonderful. A good friend of mine hosts it. A great podcast. If I Had More Time podcast, another one they do. So they have other podcasts at Mariners for sure. So they could have said, "Hey, let's make it a Mariners podcast." Man, that's success to the burden God's put on me. They say no. Well, man, I still have this burden. And I still want to follow through on it, and I'm going to move at it. When God gives us a burden, and you can't be forced into a burden. Someone can't prescribe you a burden. They can't say, "Hey, here's a burden you should have on your heart." No. when we see a need, when a burden's placed on us, and we just have this, like, we feel like we're going to jump out of our skin, actually, if we don't take some movement on this, take some steps on this, that's a holy burden. That's a godly action. The book of Nehemiah, the character, the leadership of Nehemiah, I think is something that every church worker maybe has glazed over at some point. That we're busy, we're doing a bunch of stuff. Sit down and read the book of Nehemiah in the Bible.
Yeah.
It's not that long. And you'll walk away from that. And if you're an entrepreneurial leader, or if you want to be a little bit more entrepreneurial, you'll walk away with a sense of like what burden looks like, what taking action looks like, what seeking God's favor looks like. It is a powerful book, one that I'd say like is really anchored to, a lot of what drives me when it comes to things like this. But that really resonates with me.
Absolutely. So let's get tactical for a few minutes, and then we can zoom back out and think about just overall digital media philosophy with families and kids. So
awesome.
You mentioned that you answered a couple questions already, but I want to repeat / go deeper. So you batch process on Fridays because you not only did you say I'm going to do this, but you made a big commitment, because daily content, that's nothing. That's a big thing, is what I'm trying to say. And even though it's only 5 minutes, it's a lot. And so you mentioned some of your online pastor. You've had some podcasting background, so you jumped into a sandbox that you're familiar with. So for the next few minutes, let's imagine that it's a church leader, it's a church. They know they want to be more present digitally. Podcasting is huge, and it's not going away. So walk us through your, like, what a typical productions like cycle looks like, assuming that somebody is brand new to podcasting. Like, how do you mentioned opening scripture, like, how do you look for ideas? Do you use AI to help you outline?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Do you you hit record? How heavily are you editing? Like, walk us through, like,
I'll give you
what it looks like.
I'll give you everything. So it starts with those 4 months before I launched the podcast. It was me listening to my kids, asking them questions. I talked to the principal of our school, the school the kids went to, asked them some questions. Hey, what themes do you see coming up most often in discipline? Like, hey, if every kid was forced to listen to something before they hopped out of the car, like, what are some of the themes you want them to talk about? And then I get into God's word. I do reading. I flip around. I read a lot of the Gospels, like the things that Jesus actually talked about. And then I head over to AI. So my goal is to be a month ahead on everything. Okay. And I think of AI. So let's just put this in context. Okay. AI doesn't write, what I say. AI doesn't write it and then I repeat it like a monkey. This is what AI is. AI is a writer's room. Okay. AI is a room of seminary students. I walk in the room and say, hey guys, I want you to just pitch me some ideas for episodes we could do on forgiveness. Give me 20 ideas. Give me scriptures that connect. Give me a kind of a big idea. I want you to pitch me 20, and hey, instead of coming back in a couple of hours, since you're AI, I'll wait 10 seconds. And it pitches me all these ideas. Now, here's the thing. You can use AI foolishly, or you can use it fantastically. Maybe there's a better word than fantastically. Faithfully. Maybe faithfully is a better word. You can use it foolishly, or you can use it faithfully. Using it foolishly is, hey, chat, there's someone in my church who's getting a divorce, and they emailed me. Can you write me kind of an encouraging, empathetic letter to them, and then copy and paste? That's using it foolishly.
Yeah.
Hey, chat, I'm doing an episode for Carpooling with Jesus on the topic of forgiveness. Can you write me a 5-minute episode? Give me the transcript that I can read it, copy, put it in teleprompter, read it. That's foolishly. You can use it faithfully. Hey, I haven't been divorced, so I don't know what it's like to be divorced. Put me in the head of someone who's been divorced. They reached out to me. I'm a pastor of the church. What are some of the things, maybe what are some verses, what are some things that are typical encouragement? Help me become a divorce expert quickly. Read a bunch of stuff. And then I write an email, now more informed on the topic. Okay, because now AI, I'm using it faithfully, using it to inform me. Hey, I'm writing an episode of Carpooling with Jesus on forgiveness. Pitch me some episodes. pitch me some ideas. Hey, I like idea 2, 3, and 4. Let's build that idea out a little bit more. What would that intro look like? What would that big idea, the hook, look like? I'm an old school Andy Stanley guy. Me, we, God, you, we. Okay, so what's the hook? How do I connect this to me so they know that, Pastor Justin's not just saying random stuff. This is authentic to my life. God, what does God's word have to say about it? If Jesus was riding in the car with us, what would he say? And so I build it out. I just keep asking questions and layer upon layer upon layer. And then I take that and then I put it in my doc and I start editing it. I start making tweaks, making changes, making it my own. And now I have a finished episode. And it's a transcript of an episode. I take that over to Teleprompter. It's a free app or a free website link. You go to teleprompter.com or just Google teleprompter or free teleprompter. I put it in there and boom, now I have a teleprompter on my screen. And the text that was pitched to me, it was refined with my writer's room, my writing team, which is AI, because we're using AI faithfully, not foolishly. Now I've made my own edits to it. So changing the things that's like, hey, as I'm the one who's actually doing it. Okay. I'm not a robot. Yeah. So I'm making sure that this is in line with what I believe. Like the writer's room did great, but now it's time for the host to take over and kind of make his tweaks and changes. I put it in Teleprompter and then I open up Descript, which I think is one of the best podcasts. I think Riverside's great. I think Descript is really great too, especially when it comes to editing. Recording on GarageBand is also great. But Descript allows you to edit the podcast like you would edit a Word document. So I set it up. I open it up. I have my folders, Carpooling with Jesus, and now I have Goodnight Psalms, and I have all the other ones. And I record an episode. It will update in there and it will transcribe everything I said. So if I mess up, I don't need to do this whole weird thing. I just keep talking, restart. And then when it's done, I have the whole transcript in front of me and I can go through and I edit it just like a Word document. It takes me no time at all. Yeah. Then I take that Word document and I say, hey, AI, can you give me some SEO titles, SEO show notes, SEO tags that I can use for this episode based on this transcript, and it'll give them to me. And maybe I don't like the title. Hey, give me some other, options for the title. But that's what I use Podbean. I then take the episode upload the audio, and then I take the new SEO title, the show notes that have been written for me. I drop those in. Now I've trained, my AI. It knows how I like to structure the show notes. I like to start every show notes with, hey, Carpool Crew. I like to have the links to all of our stuff at the bottom of every episode. So some of these things it just knows now because I've taught it. And it gives me the show notes, and then I schedule it, and then I walk away. And the whole process is really simple. And here's the thing. I've touched now on 8 different staff members that in a church setting we would use. Yeah. Now the difference between, and I think this is so wise for the church, leader out there. Yes, you can do it with 8 people, or you can jump on the passion of one person, train them. They have an idea, they're pitching an idea, and it doesn't mean you say yes to every idea, but if they're passionate about it, well, then they should be just as passionate about learning the ins and outs of how to accomplish it. If they're only passionate about it because other people are going to do the majority of the work for them, well, that's a different kind of passion. That's kind of a passive passion. Hey, I'm really passionate about it as long as I do a minimum amount of work. I just do the fun part. Editing, doing show notes, not the most glamorous part of a podcast, but it's necessary. But in 5 minutes, you can sit down, work through content, especially if you're only doing an episode once a week. So, you talk about content for churches. Man, the podcast space is the easiest space to jump in to having digital content. Yeah. So that's the thing I love about Mariners Church, and I love about a lot of churches, by the way. Crossroads Church in Ohio is great. Saddleback Church is great. There's a lot of great churches out there that are showing up big in the podcast space. And especially for me as an online pastor, because for every new podcast that's launched at our church, it gives me more stuff to share with the people from the online community, regardless of where they live. So when Jared, he's our Irvine lead pastor, also a very good friend of mine, a great trail runner, also the executive pastor of ministries, when he launched Intentional Parenting, the Intentional Parenting podcast, that's a podcast I can share with every family in the online community, no matter where they live. If you're a parent, you'll enjoy this podcast. And it's once a week. It's a great podcast. Every church in America can have some kind of a once a week podcast.
Yes.
It's super easy to do.
Yes.
The tools at our disposal now. So just to outline, Chat GPT is tool number one. I use it like a writer's room. I have a mic. You can get a cheap mic on Amazon. I use Descript, which they have a free version, but there's also a paid version. It's very minimal cost to record, and I do all the editing from there, and I export it from there. I go back to Chat with that transcript to then do the title and the show notes. And Podbean is where I host. You can also host it for free on Spotify. You can host it for free on Podbean, by the way, or you can pay $100 for the entire year to host the podcast and then send it to Apple and Spotify and Audible and YouTube and all these places. So you don't have to get all in on a podcast and think, oh, well, it's just going to be thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of work. That's not the case. It elevates your church experience. Having a podcast of any kind gives your pastor, either the pastors of your church as a whole, but especially your senior pastor from the pulpit, it gives them a tool in the toolbox that they can use when needed. So imagine the pastor in front of your church, speaking to your church, to the parent and saying to the parents of your church, hey, parents, by the way, we have a parenting podcast. We just launched. It's once a week. We want you to be a better parent. And so we're making this available for you. It is free. You can also send it to friends of yours because it's not going to be just, getting into the Bible and just talking about Bible verses. It's practical stuff. It's parenting stuff. Everyone in the room, if you're a parent, you can benefit from this and you can send it to your friends. Now you've used the podcast to not only connect with your people outside the church walls, but you've now created a tool which is an evangelistic tool. Hey, my church is doing this podcast. You should check it out. And then when Christmas or Easter rolls around, hey, you want to come to church with me? Yeah, it's the same church that does the podcast you've been listening to. Oh, you've been listening to it? Oh, that's so great. It gives you tools in the toolbox that you wouldn't have otherwise. And it comes at a low cost. And again, for the leader who's pretty passionate about it, it lessens that downstream impact. So it isn't, hey, I'm going to need this staff member and a couple hours from this staff member and this You can do it all from your desk as long as you have a game plan and a checklist, which is very easy to do. Chat, by the way, will help you create a checklist. Okay?
Yes.
Hey, think like an administrative assistant. I don't know how you use Chat, Matt, but that's how I always start. Hey, Chat, think like an administrative assistant and give me a checklist. Hey, Chat, think like a writer's room. Think like a content creator. Give me a script or, give me some ideas. Give me an outline. Anyone can utilize these tools. But for me, that's the practical step-by-step of how, in the end, I can end up creating a bunch of content very quickly. And for the parents listening, again, they're not listening because we're not positioning Carpooling with Jesus as this hey, every day, it's going to be 20 minutes of just purely new, unique content. I'm interviewing people and there's all these moving parts. There are three moving parts to this. Mm-hmm. It is for kids. It has some idea of what Jesus would say if he was in the car with you or at the breakfast table. And every single one ends with a question. So it puts discussion in your hands as a parent. Now, again, I think every church in America could do a daily podcast. It sounds daunting at first. Mm-hmm. Like when you pitch it, you're like, oh, we're going to do this daily podcast. It is so easy to do if you have the routine, the operations, the systems behind it. And I think that we rise and fall by our systems, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have the systems behind it of, hey, here's how we're going to do it. Here's the tools we're going to use. This is the time frame we're going to do. And some people they'll be too quick to launch. I waited 4 months to launch a single episode. All that time I'm planning, building those systems. I'm recording stuff. I'm testing stuff. So, I get a month ahead because I put all this pre-work in. So just because you have an idea doesn't mean, hey, let's launch it next week. Let me buy the equipment. Let me get these logins set up. Let's launch it. Maybe you wait 6 months, but that 6 months you spend getting a stockpile of content. It's a lot easier to do a daily podcast if before you even launch it, you're 3 months in on content.
Yes.
So it's a matter of those systems. It's a matter of the processes, but never let anyone tell you that it's like, oh, well, it's just, the church is just going to cause so much work for the staff, so much downstream impact. There's enough tools out there that if you have the savvy, if you have the willingness to learn, you can accomplish a lot. One person can accomplish a lot more than a team of 10 if they have the right tools at their disposal.
Absolutely. And, I don't know how bold or not bold this is, but I know, you and me, we're talking to each other, preaching to the choir, but it's 2025. You mentioned ChatGPT or any AI tool, just mind-blowingly powerful. And again, it could be used foolishly or faithfully, just like the internet, just like TV, just like Netflix, just like anything. Social media, yeah, anything can be used faithfully or foolishly. But so we have AI models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, all that. You mentioned Descript. There's a free version. It's $300 a year if you want to do a paid version, and it's $50. It's a little bit $600 if you want more hours. And so I want to be sensitive because, different churches have different budgets, and we're all trying to steward the money that it's other people's generosity. And also for $20 a month and plus another $30 a month, $50 a month. I mean, compare that to staff, compare that to like the electrical bill, compare that to your budget. And it really is kind of peanuts. And what I'm leading up to say is it's 2025. The people we're trying to reach, they are on digital media. They are spending hours and hours scrolling, watching stuff on screens. And Jesus calls us to go and make disciples of all nations. In 2025, the digital world is one of those nations. And I would say it's not just an option, it's a responsibility for the church to figure out how to be present in the digital space. Not to have 1 million followers, but to be salt and light so that every post, every episode, every something, it's one opportunity to have something positive that points them to Jesus in their feed. And it's not something that's leading them down another path that we don't want them to go mentally. I think it's a responsibility of the church in 2025 to figure this out. And you just mentioned your experience. If you put in a little bit of elbow grease with YouTube University and all the free stuff we have, all the options out there, anybody, no matter what your age or experience level, can learn this.
Yeah. A couple things off what you just said. I agree with every word of it, by the way. If Jesus was here today, he'd have a digital footprint, of course.
Amen.
He'd be connecting with people, inviting them over to his house. Like he would have digital events. He would probably get on Zoom and do a big night where he's teaching and it's available to everybody. He wouldn't visit porn sites. He wouldn't, set up fake accounts to try and connect with people on whatever, find to have an affair website. Okay, he wouldn't do that stuff. Just like he didn't fall into sin when he was hanging out with sinners for dinner. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what the Pharisees were like, how could he be hanging out with these sinners? Well, no, just because you're hanging out with sinners doesn't mean you're sinning. Jesus hung out with sinners, but he didn't sin. So he would be on anyone who says like, oh, well, Jesus, he wouldn't do that. Of course he would do that. He'd have a phone. He'd be posting. He'd be sharing daily, input. Hey, I'm here. Come hear me teach. Or he would just show up and start teaching, and he'd live stream it. Like I believe that's what he'd be doing. That's number one. Number two, my senior pastor, Eric Geiger, I truly respect him. And he once said in a pastor's gathering, and I'm not bringing any confidence saying this. I think he said it at other places too. Especially for large churches, he's looking at our staff. He's like, hey, for large churches uniquely, we have a responsibility to plant churches. Like for much that has been given, much is required, much is expected. So for the large church that has so much, we should. What are we doing with that money? Are we gonna buy Eric a Bentley? I don't think he wants a Bentley. Are we going to buy Eric, a really, nice house with an ocean view and a helicopter? I don't think Eric wants a helicopter. Do you know what I think Eric wants? This is why he's the senior pastor of our church. I respect him deeply. He wants to make disciples. He wants to grow congregations. He wants people to meet Jesus, not meet him, not, get a photo with him, stand in a photo line, hang out with Eric. That's not what he wants. He wants people to meet Jesus. So he believes it's the responsibility of churches that have the ability to plant churches. Because that's where we should be putting our resources. That's where we should be expanding the kingdom. And here's the thing. You don't have to have a lot of resources to make a digital footprint. It doesn't have to be like, well, we're not a mega church. We're not even a medium-sized church, very small church. Great. But, you list off some of those prices, and I agree with that. So there's some prices there, right? There's free versions of a lot of the stuff, and there's other solutions too. And honestly, you can put my email in the show notes. And if someone's like, well, what are these other solutions, man? Connect with me. I'll make time for you. I'll give you 5 other solutions that are free that fit your budget. I won't charge you for the time. It's my gift to you, to the church. So just, we'll put that in the show notes later. But if you're holding back starting something because, well, we're a small church. We're never going to be like a Life Church. We're never going to have a podcast like, this other ministry. We're never going to be like a Joe. Why would my pastor do an interview style podcast? Or he's never going to be like a Joe Rogan. First of all, stop comparing. That's evil. And I think that's how Satan keeps us from doing ministry. Number one. Number two, you're never going to be Joe Rogan. Who cares? For the people in your circle of influence, your flock, your sheep, shepherds were never concerned with the sheep from a town over.
I love that.
A shepherd was never stressed out about what was happening, 3 cities over with the sheep over there. He's looking around, stressed out.
They have 7 more sheep than me. I'm failing.
Oh, I can't believe this. I can't believe that there's sheep that look so much more healthy. There's sheep, look at how big their space is. Oh, look at the shepherds didn't care about the sheep a town over. Shepherds cared about the sheep that were in front of them. So don't worry about, you think podcasts, digital media, right? Don't think about it in terms of, well, we're going to make this available, to the world with the expectation, which I think it can be godly and ungodly, an expectation. A godly expectation says, hey, I'm going to be faithful to what God's given me and who he's put me in responsibility of. And I'm going to have this expectation that I'm going to deliver for them as a godly expectation. I think an ungodly expectation is, well, I'm going to do this podcast and, maybe I'll get invited to a conference. Hey, maybe maybe someone will want to interview me on the podcast. I was humbled when you reached out to me. And it's because I'm not sitting there, cracking my knuckles thinking, oh man, how am I going to get on some podcasts so that people know what I sound and look like? This is my big breakthrough in church ministry to be on me. You know what? Doug Fields, who's a friend and a mentor, and some people might know his name, and a lot of people probably don't. Doug Fields said that he is as famous as the world's most well-known plumber. Because in the church world, we know each other, but outside the church world, no one knows who we are. Who cares, by the way? So if what's holding you back is, well, I'm looking at the flock over there, kind of what they're doing over there, and shepherds didn't care about that stuff. Look at the people in front of you. What would benefit the people in front of you? And even if it's a crowd of 100 or less, who cares? Because in the end, and you alluded to this, in the end, the ROI on this is people connecting with spiritual things outside of the church walls, in their car, in their home, while they're out on a run, on a lunch break. So they're going to fill their space with something, by the way. So just because you're not doing anything doesn't mean they're sitting there just staring at the wall and, playing tic-tac-toe. Like, oh, if only there was some podcast to listen to. They're listening to something else. They're doing something else. So they're filling their time. So you're providing them something that they can now fill their time with spiritual things. You're also, and this is really important, giving them an avenue to share with other people. So maybe inviting people to church feels uncomfortable, but hey, digital people, you guys know this, right? We share reels. It's a natural thing to do. I will flirt with my wife all day, sending her reels, and she does the same. Sometimes she's sending me reels about the checklist of things I need to do that weekend or whatever. That doesn't matter. Things we might need to purchase for the house to upgrade. That doesn't matter. Okay, mine are mostly flirtatious. Sending reels, that makes sense in our culture today. So things that are shareable, it makes sense. So you're providing people with something that they can share. They're not inviting anybody anything. Hey, I listened to this podcast. I think you might like it. And you leave it there. Yeah. You're giving people a new tool in their own evangelistic toolbox. So we're talking about discipleship. I think sharing your story or inviting people to church, the evangelism piece, is an aspect of discipleship. So by creating a podcast or just having some kind of a digital game plan, you're providing people with the opportunity to disciple the people around them, to be invitational, to grow their own discipleship through evangelism. And I think the last thing is, that ROI will come back in people who showed up to church because, well, they heard the podcast first. I can tell you how many times I talk to people that they show up to an in-person location because they tuned in online first, or they're moving from Dallas to Orange County and they're looking for a church in Orange County, and they start researching it, where they stumble upon Mariners Online, which is a perfect conduit to, Mariners Church. There's stories like that all over the place. They start listening to a podcast, and then it connects them to the next thing and the next thing. And I think that can be done intentionally. And I think every church can do that intentionally. You're creating, we look at it on the business side, and I don't think it's going to sound weird, as a customer funnel. So, if you've ever read the 5 Ds, it's a leadership book. I have it. I'll find it and I'll give it to you in the show notes. But it talks about the customer funnel and and how you're taking people from all these different spots to then kind of slowly integrating them into and for them it's sales, but for us it's, man, we want to share the gospel with them. We want them in our church. We want them connected. So that's some of my heart behind it. I think some of the biblical thought behind it, but also like the practical. Like you're creating opportunity digitally. Using a tool that they carry around in their pocket.
Yeah.
Here's the last thing I'll say, because this fires me up, to be honest with you. I think there's nothing more grievous or offensive than the idea that pastors who love their flock will put so much time into their sermon, give it once, and man, if you weren't there, I guess you missed out. Yes. That is bananas to me in 2025. That's bananas to me. Record the lesson. Even if you don't put an intro and outro on it, record the lesson. That is a podcast. Okay, so every church in America can have a podcast with their own sermon. Take that sermon. If you have the video of it, make some clips from it. This is so AI can help you do this, by the way. This is not you at a computer, let me cut this and cut that and let me type in the words. Like, how do they do the thing with the words? There's tools out there that can do this. Then take the sermon transcript. That you can get started. I'm not saying let chat write it for you. It's not what I'm saying. But hey, if you're a small church especially, let chat help you start. You think of it like a writer's room.
Yep.
Start writing small group questions. Start writing social media post content. Start writing, take all the sermons from the last series and create a 21-day devotional out of it that you could then give to the people at your church. Even if you're not printing it, because, hey, things cost money, make it a PDF that people can download from your website, or just give it a QR code that you put in the bulletin and they can scan. I guess what I'm saying is think creatively. Like you can take a sermon and use it 10 different ways before the next weekend. But it's all about knowing those tools and being willing to try those things and just not letting great sermon content, great pastoral content die on the vine if you just weren't there. If you weren't there, I guess you missed it. That's what I'd say.
No, I'm really glad you shared that because I think it's really important. And yeah, it taps into the responsibility to spread the message that we're called to share as far and as wide as possible, using every possible advantage and tool that we have at our disposal. So
absolutely,
talking about knocking down barriers and with a little bit of learning and a little bit of, and I really mean it, a little bit of financial investment, the tools are no longer a barrier. So let's think about the church leader here and the question of imposter syndrome or confidence, or like, what if I feel like I'm bad at this when I first started? I'm afraid to hit publish because I'm not as good as somebody else that I heard. Like when you started this, did you have any imposter syndrome? Did you have any like stress or worry? Do you feel like you're better now than you used to be? Like, how do you think about your own courage to push record and then publish?
Okay, well, first of all, here's the 3 things I'd say. Number 1, go back and read Nehemiah. Pastors, leaders, church people. Okay, God gave us this book for a reason. We're meant to read it and learn from it. Go read Nehemiah. Go read Exodus. Go read about Moses. Oh God, I can't speak good. Oh, I don't think I'm the guy. God's like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, I'll just be faithful, right? Just go. I'm going to figure it out. Don't worry about it. So, number 1, if God's giving you this vision, this passion, this conviction, don't let other sissy stuff get in the way. Don't let those little voices get in the way. Don't let your own, personal view of yourself or your own insecurities, because insecurities don't come from God. So who do they come from?
Yes.
I think we all know who they come from. Satan loves your insecurities. He wants to help foster your insecurities so you do nothing. He doesn't want you doing a podcast. You think Satan wants you doing a podcast to influence people to be more like Jesus? Get real. Get out of here. He hates that idea. Okay, so he wants you insecure. He wants you nervous. So if God's given you a vision, lean into that. That's number one. Number two, it's not, oh man, I have this idea, I have this vision, I have this conviction, and I'm gonna get started, and I guess I'm gonna hit publish tomorrow. I guess I'm in the office tomorrow recording, and I'm just gonna hit publish. No, that's not a conviction. That's poor planning. So you have a conviction, you have a vision. Put some planning into it. Put some process into it. I think honor God in the planning. I dislike when pastors get up and teach. I'm sure you dislike this too, Matt. They get up and teach. They're like, you know what? I had this lesson prepared. And sometimes this is a bit, but I still dislike it strongly. And I had this lesson prepared, but you know what? I just feel the Spirit moving me today. So I'm gonna go with it. It's like, all right, bro.
Yeah. No.
You know what? The Spirit moves in the preparation, not just in the performance.
Amen to that.
He moves in the preparation. So invite the Holy Spirit to move in the preparation of your writing, the preparation of your ideas. If the Holy Spirit's not moving in the preparation and you only view the Holy Spirit as someone who moves in the performance of whatever you're doing, well, then you have a very narrow, very small view of what the Holy Spirit is capable of doing. And by the way, the Bible does not have a narrow, small view of what the Holy Spirit is capable of doing. Okay? So first, if you have a conviction, you have a vision, lean into it. Second, prepare. Put time in the preparation. Invite the Holy Spirit in. Spend time planning what this podcast is going to look like. Get feedback. This isn't something you're doing top secret, by the way, okay? You're not Apple, okay? You're not Google. There is no corporate espionage. There's no church. If you work at First Baptist Church, Second Baptist Church staff aren't coming over in disguise. Like, what's he doing? Hey, I heard they're planning a podcast. We got to get a podcast going first. Like, that's not real. Okay. So you're not famous. You are some person at a church, and God's called you to contribute something to the ecosystem of your church and of your flock. So plan, get feedback from people, record some samples. And by the way, when I first started recording podcasts, I sucked. Okay. You go back and listen to some old Controlled Chaos episodes. It was terrible. It was me sitting at my kitchen table on a microphone. Like, it was whatever. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. Jordan Peterson, which I don't know how often he's quoted on this podcast, but Jordan Peterson once had a great quote. He said, that, if you want to start something new, you have to be willing to be bad at it. The thing that keeps people from starting new things is people don't want to be bad at stuff. Like, you want to start something and be great immediately. That's just crazy. We learn that because it takes time to teach kids how to ride a bike. So if it takes kids time to learn how to ride a bike and to tie their shoes, it might take you some time to get a feel for how to host a podcast or talk to a mic in an empty room, visualizing you're talking to people listening in their cars, and they're listening as they're on a run, or they're listening in their kitchen as they're kind of cooking a meal or doing whatever. Visualizing that is hard when you're sitting in front of a screen, recording to yourself. I get that. That's not an excuse not to do it. If God's given you a vision and a conviction, it's a reason to do it, get feedback on it, do some samples, do some, recordings, send it to people, get their feedback. And then it comes to, so that's all the second thing. And then it just comes to the third thing, right? Knowing that for the people that you're making it for, as long as there's clarity around who you're making it for. Man, there's a podcast at the church we're doing for parents. Hey, this is how we're going to repurpose the sermon material, because we want life groups to go deeper, or people to go deeper in their faith based on what the sermon talk was throughout the week. Hey, we're going to do a kids podcast. Hey, forget Carpooling with Jesus. Carpooling with Jesus, they suck. We're going to make our own kids podcast. We're going to do 5 days a week and blah, blah, blah. And this is how we're going to do it. As long as you stay true to who the target audience is, and as long as you stay true to meeting the needs of that audience through the vision and the conviction he's given you and the preparation that you've put into it, then you need to go into it, lastly, just knowing that God is going to bless it. God is going to do what only he can do, that you're only a portion of the ingredients of this whole thing. Because again, it's not to make you famous. Okay, I don't know any church in America who's like, we're going to launch this podcast, we're going to monetize it, like this is how This is how we're going to quit doing church ministry, actually. We're going to use this church podcast to get out of the church. This is how we're going to get rich. Nobody's saying that, okay? I've always wanted to be a guest on Joe Rogan, and as soon as he notices this church podcast I'm doing, like, this is what's going to turn the tide. It probably won't, okay? So it's not realistic. But so let's be realistic. So the flock that God's entrusted you with, here's what you're going to present to them, and you're going to do it with conviction and the vision God's given you, and you're going to put time in preparing it. But yeah, maybe the first couple episodes are kind of rocky.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. The next 10 are going to be great, and the next 20 after that, because again, you're launching something. There needs to be consistency to it. So I think the imposter syndrome, the comparing, like all those things start to fall away when we actually open up God's word and see, well, how does he coach people in starting new things? How does he coach people who had, imposter syndrome and felt like they weren't capable of doing it? Oh, how did he do it? Oh, he walked with him in it. Oh, okay. Oh, he was there in the process with them. Oh,
yes.
Okay. Oh, they weren't just left to their own devices. Like he actually, after he gave this vision and conviction, he actually walked with them step by step and encouraged them along the way that this was a godly vision they were given. Oh, okay. So, yeah, you're never going to be, Joe Rogan. You're never going to be, whatever the other top, I don't know why the crime junkie is the one that comes to mind. Okay, you're never going to be crime junkie. Okay, you're not going to be these things, but those things are never going to be you. Those things are never going to give the personalized, and personalized is such an important word for this, because if you go into the podcast, I truly go into the podcast every episode thinking about my own kids. I want my kids in the car with my wife to dig what they're listening to. If they don't dig it, then why am I doing it? Truly, that's the deal. So you can go into it thinking, well, maybe thousands of people around the country are going to listen to this. Maybe like Mariners, you have a large digital footprint and a large, ministry footprint. Maybe you have a very small footprint. Your church in Iowa, you got 100 people, 200 people going to your church. Make it for the audience in front of you, the flock in front of you, and know that you're meeting their need. And if other people listen to it, great. But man, we got to make sure that the people in this room are listening to it. If other families, other places listen to it, awesome. But we got to make sure the people in this room like it, that they're listening to it, they're engaged. Maybe ask them for feedback. Regularly get feedback as you're going. See them on the weekend. Especially at a small church, it's so easy. Everyone knows each other. Like, hey, have you been listening to the podcast? We just launched a podcast. You've been listening to it. Hey, let me help you download it on your Oh, I don't know how to do a podcast. Oh, you have the app right on your phone. Here, let me help you download it. It can be a very personal, relational process. So imagine this. Okay, again, Matt, imagine this. Hey, we're launching a new podcast, and this is your pastor, whoever's greeting. We're launching a new podcast here at the church. First whatever church of the thing. Hey, if you're new to podcasts, go to our welcome area. They'd love to meet you. They'd love to help you get the podcast on your phone. They'd love to talk to you, encourage you. And I'm telling you, you're going to love the podcast this week. Our pastor's talking about whatever, or hey, the topic we're talking about is a marriage podcast. How relational you've now made this process, pointing them to people at your church. It's becoming a part of the culture. And again, it's meant to enhance their spiritual walk when they're outside of your walls, and something that they can share with their friends probably. And it becomes that first bit that they're getting from your church. And Jude, again, it's so easy because you have experts on your staff. So at Mariners, just for argument's sake, we have the sermon podcast, If I Had More Time podcast. We have a life group leader podcast. There's a men's ministry podcast. There is and then the intentional parenting podcast. And all these different staff are experts in different way, and they're recording the life group leader podcast, sharing it's directly. So if you're a medium-sized, large-sized church, a life group leader podcast might be the best way for you to get information to your leaders. Emails are kind of dying. Like I feel like I get too many emails. I'd rather hit delete than read it sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I'm a leader in the life group ministry, and there's a short 15-minute podcast every week. Do you give me some tips and tricks that I can implement into the podcast? And in the show notes is the link for the discussion guide, for this week for our life group. oh, it seems pretty practical, pretty easy. Now I'm using digital tools to train, to lead, to enhance discipleship. And a parenting podcast. I'll do a marriage podcast. A marriage podcast for we're talking to veteran married couples at your church. Getting wisdom and how do you make a marriage last? How do you keep God at the center of your marriage? These are like easy things to implement. It takes a little bit of work, but the ROI on it is huge because again, you're using the church things, the biblical things, to connect with them outside of the church walls in a way that already makes sense to them. Because I guarantee you, and here's the last thing I'll say, you then ask me anything. If you just got on stage this weekend and just said, hey, show our hands, who listens to podcasts? How many hands do you think are going to go up? A ton of hands. So they're already in this. They're already in this space. But again, that's why I love Carpooling with Jesus. People are already in this space. Parents want to find a routine. Parents want to find something that is anchored in Jesus, anchored in the lessons of Jesus, especially before their kid goes to school or starts school. I love doing Carpool with Jesus.
Man, I appreciate your heart. I appreciate you sharing all of that because it's really important whether we're talking about digital media for families or marriages or anything that you just described. And so here's where this isn't like a quick question, but kind of our, as we land this plane on this episode, two-part question here. Why should churches create digital media for families specifically? And then the follow-up is for any church that wants to start using Carpooling with Jesus, how can they start implementing that in their church this week?
Okay. So first one, why should churches be doing it? If your church isn't focused on enhancing the experience of the next generation, every weekend is a funeral for your church. If you're not putting time into the next generation and growing their faith, giving them opportunities to ask questions about their faith, learn about their faith, not their parents' faith, okay, not, the pastor's faith, the elder's faith, the worship leader's faith. I'm sure they all have great faiths. Helping kids in their faith, ask questions about their faith, get set up as they are going deeper into their walk with Jesus or starting their walk with Jesus. Then every weekend your church is attending their own funeral because the church is getting older. And if we're not raising up and putting time into the next, why do you think Jesus spent so much time with kids and talking to kids and actually rebuked the disciples who were focused on adult ministry? We got to do some adult ministry. Like, let's go do adult things. And he's like, I'm with the kids. I'm teaching the kids you should have a faith like a child, actually. Adult ministry guy with your spreadsheets and all your meetings. Like, have faith like a child, actually. Like, look, do you see how they're coming to me and just climbing up on me and talking with me? Like, why aren't you doing that?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, faith like a child, huh? All these people are completely confused. They don't understand this stuff because children weren't highly viewed in that culture. So it's like, it was a cultural statement for Jesus to bring such attention to children. Like, you talk about children being seen and not heard. Oh, dude, let's go to the 1st, 2nd century.
Yes.
they don't want to be seen. They don't want to be heard. Like, they're a nuisance. Like, they're free labor. They're learning the family business. Like, they don't have value until they're contributing to the family. That's not how Jesus views young people. Okay. So, and I want families. I love our kids pastor. I said that. And I love that I spent, almost a decade in youth ministry, in junior high ministry. I love that. I still talk to some of those kids who are all like in their 20s now and they're getting married and they have careers and, they're studs. Like, some of these dudes who are just scrawny middle schoolers are like jacked 24-year-olds. I'm like, oh, bro, like, what have you been injecting? It's like, oh no, this is all natural. Like, okay. Like, they're huge. I'm joking, but like they're gigantic. Like, they're studs. Like, these are full grown men now. These are men. Their parents talk to them on a daily basis. I talk to them maybe once in a while on Instagram. Maybe I run into them at church. Okay. Like, some of them I never talk to anymore. We in the church should want parents, not staff, not volunteers, parents to be the spiritual heroes. Now, we want great volunteers. We want to train them. We want great staff, of course, to lead this effort, but we want parents to be at the forefront of conversations with their kids on a regular basis. So the easiest thing is, right, the kids ministry content curriculum. You send, you send a paper home with them. Hey, this is what we talked about. Here's questions you can ask at home. Well, there's the digital version of that. the kids ministry that has an Instagram account, and every week at the kids pastor, hey everyone, this weekend at First Assembly of whatever, we're talking about Jonah, blah blah blah, and here's some questions parents you can ask your kids, because this is the big idea from this week. Now again, my kids don't have Instagram accounts. They don't have cell phones, nor will they have cell phones for a very long time. So they're not the target audience. Most churches, and I'd love your immediate commentary on this. Most churches' kids ministry Instagram accounts, the target audience should not be the kids.
Right.
They should be the parents.
Yes.
It's not the kids. The kids aren't sitting there scrolling. And by the way, if they are, their first thought is not, where's my church's Instagram account? My church, they have to have an Instagram. Forget Dude Perfect. Forget Mr. Beast. Where's First Assembly of Wichita's Instagram account for their kidmin? Right, bro? I mean, that's bananas. That's insane. So a kid's ministry Instagram account should never be positioned for the kid. Parents aren't handing their kid, here's a church post from the kids ministry. Here, check this out, and handing the kid, their phone. Parents aren't doing that. Kids ministry accounts should be geared toward parents, supporting the parents, elevating parents, equipping parents. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'd love your immediate commentary on that before I answer your second question.
I completely agree, because when I think about it as I have a baseball background. And so the thing that popped into my head is, I coached youth baseball for a long time, and parents would bring kids to me for a 30-minute or a 60-minute lesson. And there's instructors and coaches that are like, I don't want the parents around. It's me and the kid. Mm-hmm. And that was their approach, to each their own, not my approach. I wanted the parent sitting there at the lesson, listening to every word I shared with the kid. Mm-hmm. Why? Because there's a car ride home. There's little Johnny going out in the backyard working on his swing. There's the parent, frankly, if I feel like I can help this kid and the parent's writing the check, is the parent going to bring him back so that I can keep working on him, helping build confidence and get his swing better? So the partnership with parents is absolutely essential, because families are absolutely integral to the health of young people. A stable, healthy family is really essential. And as kids ministry leaders, as youth ministry leaders, I work at a church and I don't know what to do with my kids all the time. I'm always asking myself, how am I pointing them to Jesus? How am I setting an example? And I think about this stuff all the time and work at a church. So really investing in the parents who are actually on the social media accounts, equipping them to raise and foster discipleship in their kids, that's everything. Because without the parents, then I think we're just going to be, we're going to be shouting by ourselves in the forest, and nobody's going to even know that we're out there. So,
Matt, do you hear that? Do you hear that right now? That is the sound of ministry leaders sending calendar invites to their kids staff, to their youth staff, and saying, hey, let's take a look at our strategy for how we're using our kids and youth channels. Hey, let's just take a fresh look at that. And by the way, there should be nothing wrong with taking a fresh look at things. I'm sure there's a lot of churches out there who are like, oh yeah, we're creating kids content for the kids, cool kids content for the kids. Let's take a fresh look at that, because I don't know a lot of 5-year-olds and 7-year-olds that have cell phones. Seriously. And if they do, bro, whenever my kid takes my phone, he's not looking for Mariners kids. He's looking for Mr. Beast. He's looking for, there's a bunch of other people that I can't name them because I'm not cool. I'm lame. I'm 40. Okay. I'm old. I'm unimpressive. But all these people on YouTube, these YouTubers, he's like, oh yeah, this guy's building a hidden room in his house. Okay, bro, he's building a soccer field outside in his backyard, and he only has a budget of $200. Okay. I mean, sounds awesome, bro. So we can never compete with that in the eyes of a kid, churches, but we shouldn't be trying to compete with that. But they can never compete with us when it comes to the material we provide to help parents spiritually disciple their kids. Okay. Mr. Beast I'll never be able to compete with him with the stuff he's doing. He will never be able to compete with me when it comes to putting out material that, is spirit. And by the way, if he switches gears and decides to do a kids devotional podcast, I probably couldn't compete with him, honestly. I think a lot of kids would listen to that, but chances are he's not going to. Okay. So my focus is that, all right, to answer your second question, there's a couple, a handful of churches around the country that already do this, and I love it. And I'll put the links to the podcast in the show notes because people can check this out. But listen, ministry leaders, I do Carpooling with Jesus with one focus in mind. That focuses my own kids. I want my kids to benefit from it. And because I want my kids to benefit from it, there's a couple things I take into account. My kids know where I work. My kids know where I live. Like, my kids don't need sponsors to listen to. So why would I put any of that on the podcast?
Right.
So none of that's on the podcast. There's no episode of Carpooling with Jesus that's like, hey, everyone, it's Justin from Mariners Church. Let me tell you about our sponsor, whoever's. That's never on it. And there's a reason for that, because my kids don't need to listen to it. But the downstream impact of that is churches can then use Carpooling with Jesus, because maybe, like you said before, man, there's budget constraints. I know a lot of churches that, by the way, it's the senior pastor, a part-time secretary, maybe a volunteer kids pastor. Okay, that volunteer kids pastor is probably working, selling insurance, or they're a stay-at-home mom, or they're doing some other job. They don't have time to put together a podcast.
Yep.
Great. Carpooling with Jesus is here for you, because you can pass this podcast off as your own. I could care less. Like, it has nothing to do with me at all. There's churches that will print out little handout cards that are basically like, hey parents, here's a daily devotional podcast for you to listen to with your kids. And it's like, well, who does it? Oh, this guy, Pastor Justin, does it. Veteran pastor, and he 4 kids. He loves his kids, and it's a kids podcast. But it's because it's not tied to any geographic area, because it's not tied to any church or any sponsor. Any church in America or any Christian school in America can feel confidence in recommending it, handing it out, making it their church's kids ministry podcast. It's like, oh, did you check? Because there's no end in sight. Like, there's no, like, I'm not going to stop doing the podcast next week. Like, there's no end in sight.
Yep.
So it's going to be a consistent podcast, and it's going to be one that now you have something to offer. And I think, especially the volunteer youth worker, or volunteer kids pastor, or just a small church, or they just have a lot of other things on their plate. This it meets a need that already exists. Every parent is looking for stuff they can put on in the car on the drive to school, or, on the pickup or the drive to practice. Let's give them something. And by the way, it's free. It's free. I don't even need to know if your church does it, by the way. You could take the links and you don't need to tell me. Just share it with parents. Let them love the podcast. And it's free. It doesn't cost them a penny Monday through Friday. It's 5 days of episodes. Everyone ends with a question. Take a listen. And man, I see churches taking advantage of it. I love it, because in the back of my mind, one of the secondary goals is for it to be used that way. But that primary goal, like, I want my own kids to listen to it. So and I want to give my kids the best. Like, every dad, you want to give your kids the best. And so, like, that's the level of quality I put into them. I want my kids to have the best, and hopefully, other families, other parents, other churches get to take advantage of that, that quality for their own families, for the families of their church. It's free. Like, it'd be so cool this weekend, because I'm telling you, this weekend, today is, whatever day this airs. This coming weekend, you could print off a thing or put it in an email, put a link in an email. Hey, parents, check out this podcast. It's free. I think you're going to like it. 5 days a week, devotionals, have conversations with your kids. That it's a super easy thing to do, and it's available. It's accessible. And again, they're never going to be sold some curriculum. It's never going to be like, Mariners Church is come to our Mariners Church Christmas services. It's never going to be that, ever. But we do episodes like we're doing a series right now in November about thankfulness.
Cool.
Some of the early episodes they could go back and listen to is about being thankful for the leaders of our church. Another episode is being thankful for the volunteers of our church, being thankful for our pastors, and then again, being thankful for our friends, being thankful for God's forgiveness, being thankful for our parents. So, like, this whole month we're doing thankfulness. September, we did Proverbs for your school life. So we looked at a different proverb every day. And it's like, hey, what wisdom can we gain from Proverbs that we could apply to our everyday school life? We're going to kick off 2026 with the Beatitudes. I kicked off 2025 with that. So we're going to take a new, fresh take at the Beatitudes in 2026.
Nice.
And here's what I'm really excited for, because I think this is going to post in time. Starting November 30th, Yeah, I think this will definitely post in time.
Mhm.
We're kicking off Advent on Carpooling with Jesus. So
Nice.
every single day, we'll have an Advent episode. They're all already recorded. They're all already scheduled. These are awesome episodes. And for any church that does Advent, great. I think most families have some kind of an Advent calendar. Like during the Christmas season, Advent kind of makes sense in the regular rhythm of families. So that's what the whole month is up until Christmas. And then we're going to do a couple episodes as we lead into the new year. But, creating themes that resonate, that are timely, that apply to families. And, so if you're a church that's doing some kind of an Advent thing, maybe the podcast for you, again, it's free. It just becomes like another thing that you're offering, another thing you're making available. Just the extra, it doesn't end up being the main course of your ministry, but it ends up being like a nice little side that you're offering from your ministry.
Yeah.
You be the hero. They don't need to know who I am. It's not like I'm asking them to follow me on Instagram and be my buddy. You be the hero of your church, and then give parents the opportunity to be the spiritual heroes of their home.
Amen. Justin, that's the perfect way to land the plane, so to speak, on this episode. I think I appreciate you. I appreciate your heart. Appreciate everything you've shared. We've covered so much ground. Everything from how this turned into an idea, how you approach doing it as a church leader with or without the church. We talked about some nuts and bolts of what does it look like to actually capture, and then every church. There's a lot of quotes in here that I'm going to remember, but if we're not reaching the next generation, every Sunday is a funeral. So content for families and the next generation of kids is essential. And so this episode, church leaders out there listening, this equips you to get started. And so if that makes sense in your context, then please do. And if that doesn't make sense in your context, check out the show notes. We'll have Justin's email because he's super generous with that. We're going to have all the details on Carpooling with Jesus. Advent's a great time it's a catalyst. People are starting to think about, I haven't been to church in a year. I'm going to come again. It is just a great time to get started. So all of that will be in the show notes. My email's in the show notes. Justin's is. So all the church leaders out there, please start doing something if you're not already. And if you can't do it yourself, Carpooling with Jesus is there. Justin, I just really appreciate you. Appreciate your time and your generous heart. Just doing this because you feel called to and sharing it to reach as many people as possible. Thank you so much for your time today, Justin.
Anytime for you, Matt. Thanks for everything you're doing, brother.